The ego is such a powerful thing, and we all live in some level of an ego because that's what makes us exist, right? That's who we are. But it is something that I have just totally specialized in, and I wanted to break down kind of like where you're operating from, just so you have an idea. You can't really actually start healing something until you know the why. So welcome to episode 93 of the Positivity Experience. Let's unbox that ego. Check it out. Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 93 of the Positivity Experience. It's your girl Lori, and woo, you're going to hear a helicopter, airplane from time to time. We are getting crop dusted from time to time. So if you hear it, I'm not at an airport. I don't have a private plane. They're just like doing the things that they do. And I want to give a huge shout out to our newest Patreon members, Trina at our abundance level. Love you. Thank you. And Mandy at our gratitude level. And this week's episode is on narcissism on the Patreon. So we're talking about different types of narcissism, some of my experience with growing up with a narcissist, how we work through that. And that is over at the Patreon. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can find that like right now. And if you want to be a Patreon member, you can just go to patreon.com/Lori Wheeler, or you can always hit the link anywhere you are hearing this podcast right now. If you choose to become a Patreon, you will get one episode extra a week. So that's 4 episodes a month. And it is just another tool to put in your toolbox. So we do here and we do there. And today we are going to talk about my best friend, the ego, baby. Oh my God. You hear me talk about this in all my content. Once I was going through my healing, as with anything else that I learned in my healing, I wanted to really understand narcissism. And I wanted to really go into human behavior and like really understand it and figure out like, what is this? Like what, you hear about it, you hear about Sigmund Freud and like, is he crazy or whatever? Well, listen, he's no more crazy than anybody else, right? Like that's not really a thing. And, his whole philosophy on it is something, and it's a psychoanalytic theory. And it is something that I firmly align with, and we've just seen it, not just me. I mean, clearly it's a thing, or we would not be talking about it, right? And so I want you to think of the middle part of the ego. So there's the 3 parts according to Freud, right? You have your id, you have your ego, and you have your superego. And we're going to talk about them. And if you're refusing to let things go, if you're not, so many things, then you are living in your id, or sometimes your superego. You want to live in the middle of your ego because that kind of like bridges the two together. But it's when you refuse to let go of things, when you feel entitled, it goes a little bit into your id. And sometimes you're living in your id if you're in narcissism, right? And so there's a combination. There's a lot of things. It's not just black and white, one way or another way. There's a lot of different things that kind of filter into all of this. But I want to go through each of those because they're like my favorite thing. And the id is where I see a lot of people live, and definitely the superego, right? Again, not at an airport, but I can't do anything about it. I'm here for it. I'm like, land here and pick me up. And it's really cool too. Side note, they get really low to the ground and I'm like, I want to ride with them. But yeah, so with the id is, think of that as like your primitive thing. Like it's almost like your critter part of your brain, like your amygdala. It's primitive. It's an instinctual part of your mind. It like houses like your sexual, your aggressive drives, any kind of hidden memories can also go there too. Sometimes they can get skewed. And that's where you'll see people go, oh my God, they're just like, can't they control themselves? Honestly, no, sometimes they can't. Sometimes a sexual addiction or something like that is a real thing. Like it's not like just something that people are like, I'm just going to use this. No, it can be a thing. And that is usually rooted within this id, right? So everybody has it. You're like born with these 3 parts of your ego, right? Your soul is still all in yourself. But when you're in your id, you just want what you want when you want it, baby. Like you are willing to just do whatever you need because your needs matter right there. Now, believe it or not, part of that id, right? So you hear it as like being aggressive or primitive or sexual, but it's also that part of your brain that doesn't have patience, or of your ego that doesn't have patience. You don't want to do the work. You want to win the Super Bowl, but you don't want to go to training camp. You want to do the therapy, but you don't really want to do the work that comes with that. You don't want to do the 5 journals. You don't want to revisit your old things. You want it to be everybody else. That's your id. Your id wants it right now. It doesn't want to wait, and it wants to be the inner brat. That's what I call your inner brat. Your inner brat, I wish I had this. I wish I had that. I got to do this. I need this right now. Like that is your id in like the highest of levels. Now, I also see a lot of clients who live in the super ego. We're going to talk about the middle in a minute because the middle isn't even that exciting. It's just that's a great place to be. But the super ego, that operates in your moral consciousness. Okay. Now it is the realistically, because the ego itself is the realistic part that mediates the two. But think of what your consciousness is. So let's go into that super ego. This is that ethical component of your personality. This is your moral standards, and your moral standards will be where that middle ego wants to operate from. So the super ego's criticisms, right? That's there. And it's not like, it seems like it's not bad, right? Like you're like, okay, that's not bad, but it can be. It can be if you're learning your morals and your super ego. This is what I would call a limited belief, right? So I've said this before, you're born. Sometimes you have a name picked out from even before you're born, name picked out, political, religious affiliation, how we do things, what these expectations are. You're given that. You're giving something, you're absorbing something in your super ego from your parents' super ego, right? And it's that internalized space that you're like, okay, well, I don't like this. I don't align with this. And now it can be good because it will try to suppress and try to prevent the id from just running rampant. Like, well, I'm going to go do whatever I want, because the id really wants to do whatever it wants. It wants the cake. Like the id is like, see this cake, eat this cake. Oh, what? No, you're diabetic. No. Eat it anyway. And your super ego goes, hey, I really don't think that that's a good idea, because if you eat this, right, and you think, okay, well, that's good. Yes, the super ego doesn't have to be all bad. The problem comes when you're doing what your moral standards, your super ego standards that you've learned from other people, society, whatever, okay? You're now saying this is more superior over my needs, because the id part isn't all bad. Nothing is all bad. In life, nothing is bad unless you do it in excess, right? Like, I mean, realistically. Well, within reason. But you have to realize, yeah, the id is like, hey, man, we need what we need and we need it right now. That's great. And your ego, which is that middle piece that takes the realistic expectations and realistic standards and kind of bridges, well, what do we want? Okay, morally, what, you don't want to like just do whatever you feel like it. So let's take these two and balance them, which is essentially where you want to live, right? So you want to like live there. You want to try to live in that area. But the problem comes, yes, from trauma, yes, from various things. Yes, especially if you're a narcissist or have dealt with a narcissist, different areas can become like what I call hypervigilant, right? So you can't have that part of you that says, I want this and I want it now and I don't want to do the work for it. And it's everybody else's problem but me. Don't they see that my feelings are hurt? Da, 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 da. Now, what I just explained also goes into some narcissism. So again, narcissism and the id, if those are kind of on point, do pretty much like to date. Like those two kind of go really good together. They don't always have to be present, but they kind of are. Okay. And so this is that big piece of it. Now, it becomes problematic if your morals, you are putting them on everybody else. I need my kids to do this. What do you mean you're not going to this church anymore? What? Are you kidding me? That also goes into a little bit of narcissism, and manipulation, but it is also that part of your super ego. So when your super ego is high and or your id is high, you're not going to be balanced, right? Like you're just not going to be balanced. You just can't, right? So if you think about it, does your personality live in your id? I've had that question asked to me. Ish, right? Because it's instinctual, right? That's kind of like, hey, this is what we do. Yes, it's instinctual. So kind of, okay? And that is there at birth. But you do have those other parts of your ego, right? Because I think if you were born and you had your id, I don't think you could have a super ego really, because you're not learning anything. So I think you'd have your id, which in turn would be like your ego, but I don't think it would be on such a high level, right? And I think that what's happening there is when you are not allowing yourself to release something, so someone's done you dirty, right? And I mean, somebody's really, and trust me, and you guys know this, I have worked with like clients whose families have been annihilated, and they have forgiven, moved forward, let go of their ego, and they are thriving. They are thriving. Okay. Yes. Your ego, your id, not your ego, your id says, well, your id and your super ego here, they're kind of at a fight for like, who's going to win this battle is, that person did what? Oh, hell no. I'm not going to let that go. Nope. That's your ego. That is your id. That is your super ego. That's exactly what that is. So for you to not be able to release it because you think that you're protecting yourself. If I release this, I'm giving someone permission to have done that. Well, it's already been done. You're not permitting something. It's already happened. Now, you don't have to stay for it. You don't have to like other people's actions. You don't have to align with other people's actions, but you have to accept that they don't have to be yours. They are not you. Everyone is not you, and they do not have to act as you in any area. And you don't have to deal with it one way or another. You can exit that. And if you can't, we can find you a way to get out of it. So, but you need to understand that piece of it. All right, because you not releasing something, you swear that it's helping you. It's imprisoning you. You are the one that's sent up at 2:00 in the morning, tossing and turning and being angry and holding on to this and searching their social media and trying to figure out, well, what are they doing? Why are they living their best life now? Ego. That is id, and superego. That's exactly where that lives. That's definitely not the middle part. You're in both of those areas, and you're teetering between both. So you have to understand that, because when you won't release something, yes, you were hurt. I hear you. You can validate yourself. You're waiting just to wait on an apology. Well, now that goes into entitlement too. Just to wait on an apology and to think I can't release until someone apologizes. You literally think that you just did yourself a favor. Do you realize you said, hey, Bob, can you please hold my power for me until you want to give it back? Like, you literally did that. You did that. They didn't take it. You gave it to them. To say, I'm not going to release this until you apologize. You think you're in control. The funny thing is you literally just gave somebody else the power. Because now they can be like, well, F them. I'm not going to go apologize. And what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and hold on to it? You've lost that battle. You've lost that battle. That's your ego. To forgive, I know people, I've seen the memes. I've heard people say, I don't have to forgive. No, you're right. You don't have to forgive. But your resistance to forgiving is within your id and your superego. And until you truly do let it go, I said forgive. I didn't say forgive and be like, sure, come back in my life. Sure, let's hang out. That's not what I said. To forgive will always free you. That lives in the middle part of the ego, that good part of your ego, right? Because what the ego does, let's go in that middle piece. Like I said, it's like the mediator. That ego says, id, I'm going to need you to sit down. I know you want to do this tonight, and I know you like this person, but I'm going to need you to like, hey, you just need to pump your brakes over there. And superego goes, yeah, you need to pump your brakes. You heard them because you know that that's wrong. And ego goes, nothing is wrong. We're going to do a little bit of both, and we're just going to see where we can find that happy medium. But that's where you want to live. And in order to do that, you have to even ask yourself, these morals that you were taught, these morals, these ways of doing things in your life that you were taught, do you align with them? Do you align with them? Because, here's the part with that. If you're not in alignment, you shouldn't be in it. I mean, that's just how alignment works, right? I mean, that's literally what that works. And how that works. And just like ego death, you've heard me talk about ego death, right? There's a whole series, 5, if you get a chance, go out to my YouTube. It's in a little playlist called Ego Death Series. It kind of helps you with the process of how you can start to release your ego. But there's also ego integrity. So ego integrity is now, and where we start to work on that is when you have a hard time with death. Okay. So like what I mean by a hard time with death is you're just not going to accept it. Like you fear it, right? Which is, I mean, that's fine. I think to some level, most people will fear it on some point, but it's when it becomes problematic. Okay. And when you have that psychosocial development, and this is something Eric Erickson had wrote about. And like when you do a lot of behavioral stuff, you'll read a lot of his stuff. And so there's like, different stages. There's like 8 stages of this psychosocial development, and integrity of the ego is so amazing because that's going to be relied within your sense of self, and allowing yourself to accept death. Your death is inevitable. You resisting it lives within that ego. To think that you can outrun it is an ego, right? I know it comes out into anxiety a lot of ways, right? But no. And I think that that's the biggest piece. So a lot of times when people are struggling within their ego, they're like, really refusing to let things go. You're holding on to a lot of grudges. You're living in a victim mentality. So you're living not in that great space of your ego. Another thing with ego, you rely your worth on your external stuff. Like, oh, look at this job I have. Look at all of this material success, like my Tesla. Well, I just say that because I'd be a little bitter. I want a Tesla. I wouldn't be bitter, but I do want a Tesla. But that's where that comes. If you identify and you are proud, which be proud of your achievements, you should be proud of your achievements. But if you bank your worth on your job or your kids or your family, you're living in your ego. See, it's one thing if within your ego, you look at someone and you go, wow, they are really successful. I'm inspired by them. I want to talk to them. See, when you're living in that healthy part of your ego, you're not jealous of other people. You're not in comparison. You look at someone and go, wow, they are really doing well. I'm inspired. I want to know more. You're willing to work on that. You're willing to constantly grow. You know that you want to surround yourself. You want to kind of be, in many ways, maybe the lack of education of everybody in the room. You want to elevate your game, and you can only elevate your game and your knowledge based on people who are at that higher level than you at that moment. Don't get the ego or the id part, super ego, all those things. Don't go into that aspect of it and be like, well, I want to be the biggest fish in the pond. That's a whole different part of your ego. Be the teeny tiny fish in the great big pond, and then go find the big fish and go hang with the fish. Learn to swim under the big water. Learn to do that. You don't have to do it all by yourself. You're absolutely living in that negative part of your ego when you refuse, when you're like, well, it can only be done my way. Like, nobody does it the way I do it. Yeah, because they're not you. That is true. But if you refuse to let other people do stuff because they just can't do it right, ooh, yeah, living in your ego. And I mean, it could be small stuff. It could be like, I think you overpacked the Q-tip container. What? That is absolutely ego. See, if you don't live in that negative part of your ego, you're embracing what your limits are. You put your pride aside and you go, oof, yeah, I don't understand that. You're going to have to help me. But if you're living in your ego, you go, I mean, it's hard, but I ain't going to tell anybody I need help. I don't want to look dumb. Why? Everybody starts at 0. Everybody starts with 0 knowledge. What do you mean? That's your ego. That goes into your superego, actually. And remember, money, success, fame, followers, anything that you put out there, that can be intoxicating. The intoxication of that level of success. But you got to be careful. You need to check yourself at the door. You need to look at it for what it is. Keep there in the moment. Don't get yourself all caught up in, look how successful I am. Because you just literally, you attached your identity based on your ego. You attached your identity on your success. What? That could be taken from you tomorrow. And then that's where you struggle even more because you were reliant upon whatever this is that's going on. And now it's been taken away and you have no idea how to respond because your entire being and your entire ego was caught up in, this is what I do and this is how smart I am. That's why you always stay humble and learn. Don't be the smartest person in the room. Be the person who has the most to learn in the room. 2 different things. You don't need to know everything. in this profession and in everything I do, I'm always learning. I have to always learn. Things change. New things happen. I love to talk to people who are like so intelligent and like so much more versed in certain things so I can learn, so I can share that with others. Because remember this, and Warren Buffett said this, your potential is what you measure it by, not external validation. So let me repeat that again by Warren Buffett. Your potential is what you measure it by, not external validation. And this is why I tell you, looking for that external validation, absolutely not, hard pass. Because a person can only validate you where they are. Now imagine if someone is living in their superego, okay? And their superego is their moral compass. Like, this is my morals, it is right. Now you have asked someone's opinion, different, but you've asked the opinion because you're going to kind of really hold credence to what they're saying. Now, mind you, the person is living in their superego and their moral compass. They can only give you validation based on where they are in their superego. Then if you adapt it, you just adopted their superego and put it into your life. Now, Seneca is another one that I've done some readings with and stuff. And, he says, or Seneca says, he who indulges empty fears earns himself real fears. So let me explain what that means. And I'm going to repeat it again. He who indulges empty fears earns himself real fears. So we know fears are false evidence appearing real. Yes, they feel real to us in the moment. Let's say you have an empty fear and you start feeding life into that. You've now created real fear. That goes into your id. Now we are in your id. We are in your superego. We are all over your ego. Right? And here's another thing. If you think everybody's out to get you, or that you're going to seem weak, and everybody wants to get over on you, yep, you are living in your ego. Yes, you are. But when you're forgiving, when you're confident, when you're strong, when you are in self-love, you're living in that happy medium. You can respect people. You can allow them to be who they are. You don't care if it doesn't work with your narrative. You're not judging it, but you are protecting your peace. That's what it's like to live in the good part of your ego. I mean, it's not really good and bad, but let's say the healthier part of your ego. That's so important. Like I said, I try to observe and learn. I read this in some book. Learn something new every day. Learn a new word, learn something new. You got to do that. You got to do that. Because when you do that, you're constantly being humbled. You must remain humble. And, when you're sitting there, and let's say you have a big assumption or a big moral compass, and you're like really staunchly strong in it, but they're challenged a little bit. You're challenged in some way. You're going to get defensive. That doesn't mean, look at me, I'm right. You can be right and you can be happy. Choose one, because you're not going to be both. So if you want to be right, you're going to go on this big, long mission in life to see, look at me, I'm right. Look at me, I'm right. Go ahead, do that. You're going to feel lonely. Or you can be happy and understand that, what? Sometimes let them win the day. That's all amazing. You have to allow that. When you're in that healthy part of the ego, there you have it. That's how it'll be. And this is so important, I think that that's where, so many people think that they're entitled to things and worried so much about their image and, why do they, I care about what people think of how I look as a family person. You're kidding me, right? Like, why? Why do we care that Bob Jones down the street has an opinion on what my marriage looks like or my parenting looks like? Why are we giving Bob Jones all this power? And why are you living in your ego? So, because you can't be a normal person, like whatever normal is, let's say average person. No one has a perfect life. No one has a perfect marriage. No one has a perfect relationship. No one has a perfect job. Stop with the perfect. Everybody is going through something. Every human on the planet. So everybody lives differently, and that's great. You're not going to be for everybody. I'm not going to be for everybody, but that's okay. There are people who are going to be for us and that we are going to be for, and that's great. Stop seeking, that's ego. Stop thinking everybody needs to like you. Everybody's opinion of you needs to be of this highest caliber. They are allowed whatever opinion they want. You don't have to feed into it. You don't have to rock with it. Be the queen of the block or the king of the block. I tell you guys that. Block like a profession. If it is not serving your best and highest good, don't engage in it. Just block it. And that means real life too. So now you have to ask yourself, well, what am I supposed to do with all this ego stuff? Well, you're going to have to learn to let it down. You can book a session with me. You can do a lot of more knowledge on it. And like I said, because in the narcissism podcast that I did over on Patreon, we talk about the different areas of the brain because I studied like the brain, right? So like, you have your hippocampus, you have your prefrontal cortex, you have your amygdala. That houses a lot. So believe it or not, there's some levels of narcissism that do go with the ego. But there's one part of narcissism that's amazing, and that's adaptive narcissism. And we talk about that over there too. So you have to understand everything is not bad and everything is not good. Everything within moderation. But if you are finding yourself living holier than thou, so to speak, and living in a space that your way is the right way, especially when it comes to religion or politics or things like that, that may work for you and great. You should be very strong for your own convictions. This doesn't mean be strong in your convictions and make other people change their convictions. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that, this is where you get to really start working on your self-confidence, learning to establish those boundaries by saying no. So if someone is really coming in hot with you in their ego and this is my way or no way, or this is what we need to do, you can just say, I don't allow myself to be spoken to that way. But you have to be willing to be okay with that person not liking that response. See, and that's a really good way to kind of like give you kind of a little bit of like homework. Ask yourself why you were so resistant to standing up for yourself just because somebody else is going to get upset with you. Why are you so resistant in that? Because then their feelings are going to be hurt. You can't hurt their feelings. All you did was not do what their ego wanted you to do. That was their ego. You have to be able to protect your peace. Yes, compromise. Yes, be empathetic. Yes, do those things. But what you don't do is sacrifice your peace for anybody. You as an adult, you're not obligated to be friends with somebody. You're not. And that means you're not obligated to be friends with your parents. You're not obligated to have a relationship with them. And if you think that, and I'm a parent, if you think that you're entitled and you're obligated, somebody is obligated to be like, call you and do these things. No, they're not. That's ego. No, they are not. So this is that part that you have to get very clear. Are you willing to do the work? So many people say to me, I just want to get out of my ego. Okay, well, here's some steps. Oh my God, that seems difficult. Of course it's difficult. But which hard is easier? The hard that you're going to stay the same, or the hard that's going to take some time? You're going to slide backwards. You're going to go forward. You're going to do all of those things. But then you're going to feel better, and you're going to have better relationships, and you're going to have self-love, and you're not going to focus on the victim piece of it. You ask yourself which level of hard it is. Because life in general, right? Like being a human being is difficult. It's difficult. I don't care where you live listening to this. Being a human being can be difficult. There's a lot that comes with it. As kids, a lot of times we go, I just can't wait to get older. I can't wait to get older. I can't wait to get older. And then you get older and you're like, oh, daggone. Somebody should have told me. And you go, somebody did tell you. And then your ego goes, yeah, we didn't listen. So many teenagers live in their egos. So many people live in ego. Like I said, at any given point, you're going to live in some part of your ego. You want to be at that middle part. Yes, I teach people this all over. So I can tell from a conversation with somebody within 5 minutes which part of the ego that they're living in. And then I can address it accordingly. Like I don't have a set way of like, okay, everybody who comes to me, we're going to do this with your id, and this. No, because everybody's living in a different part of it and on a different level of it. So that's an important piece for you because you say you want to do the work. You say you want to feel better. You say you want to, live your best life. But do you? Right? I mean, I know that sounds crazy because you just said I did. But do you? That comes with, and I say this to every one of my clients when we first start, as you start your healing, you will lose people. It may not be, you may not realize you're doing it. You may not realize that maybe you stepped away from people. You are losing people, and that's great because people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Just because they served a purpose and you served a purpose in their life doesn't mean on growing, you guys, and by the way, nobody's better. You're not above somebody. You're not beneath somebody, but you guys can fall out of alignment when one person's on one journey and another person's on another, and that's fine. But if you're not willing, and maybe that person's your spouse, maybe that person's your kid, maybe that person's your parent. See, you don't get to go into the healing piece of it and want to control how you heal. Well, I want to talk about this, but not this. I want to do this, but not that. Going into your ego. So I'm interested to know what part of the ego you think you live in. And then if you want to work on that, just let me know, and we'll even do more work on the ego, because when you get in the middle, it's a beautiful, beautiful place to live and an amazing ego to have. Check it out.